and welcome to Webster's Red Door podcast. I'm Maggie Sanchez, and I'm the host of this little lovely podcast where we discuss various topics surrounding the English department. And today I'm sitting down with someone whose schedule makes mine look like a cakewalk. She's not only a professor here at Webster, but she's also part of the committee for the sustainability studies and the English department's current chair. I'm talking to the one and only Karla Armbruster.
Thank
How
you,
we
Maggie.
doing?
Yeah, I am pretty busy this semester, but I'm just trying to take things one step at a time.
Believe me, I understand that so much. I like my schedule, like it's a miracle that I remember things.
Yeah,
So I can't even imagine for you. So can I ask you something?
sure.
Um, why did you choose English as a major? Weren't you going to be like a vet or something?
Yes. So I know that I've mentioned that to students probably a few times. So when I was a little girl, I loved two things. I loved reading and I loved my dogs. I wasn't so sure about other people. I did like
Felt.
school in general. I have some horrific stories. I went to one of these Catholic schools with the scary nuns. So
Same.
yeah, so not every class was a delight, but I did love learning, and I had teachers who really fostered my love of reading. Um, so for a long time, I wanted to be a veterinarian. It was probably also because I was a big fan of the All Creatures Great and Small books, mostly really that first book, All Creatures Great and Small. And so, as I went through school, I really liked science. I still do. I'm fascinated with the way our world works. I was overly enthusiastic about my kids' science fair projects, probably. I did spend some time as a science writer, so it's still something that I'm engaged with. But when I went to college, I went to Cornell University for my first 2 years, and I was a biochemistry major. And they, at that time anyway, had these big lecture classes that were mostly for pre med students, and they were designed to weed people out. And
Mm.
so everything was okay.
Survival of the fittest?
Yeah, pretty
Jeez.
much. Yeah, Webster doesn't do that, which I'm very happy
I'm
about.
happy for that. That's terrifying.
No, it's terrible. It's not a great way to teach people. I mean, the goal isn't to teach people. Obviously, it's to get people to sink or swim.
Oh, yeah.
I did have some good teachers, and I got through calculus because of the help of some of my teachers. But
That sounds
the
exhausting.
course that killed me was organic chemistry because it's a lot of memorization and it was very boring. And my husband will tell you I have very little tolerance for being bored. And I
Same.
just stopped doing it. The professor at the beginning of the semester told us that if you really understood the principles, you could figure out all the formulas. So you didn't have to memorize them. And of course, I just thought, oh, I'll do that. But I didn't have that level of understanding. So I actually passed the class because it was so hard that just by guessing on the multiple choice test, I did better, I guess, than some people. And I also did pretty well right at the beginning when we were doing non memorization stuff.
God.
Um,
It's
but
intense.
yeah,
Math and me, absolutely not. There's a reason why I'm a creative writing major.
yeah.
Absolutely not.
No, a lot of our English majors are kind of math phobic, which I get, although I do also think that math skills are super important.
They're so important. I
Yeah,
just do not possess them.
yeah. Well, that's a whole other conversation. But after my first semester of organic chemistry, I came back and signed up for the second semester, same professor, and he passed out the syllabus. And at the bottom, there was a little drawing of him as an owl behind a desk, and the little word balloon said, "Ha ha, they thought last semester was tough." And I thought,
Jesus.
oh, this isn't going to work. I barely skated by last semester, and now I don't know any of those things. So I changed
You
my
don't
major
need
to
to.
English because I was still taking English classes. I still enjoyed them. I thought, I'm getting good grades in that. So,
Do something you enjoy,
yeah.
not something that's terrifying.
Well,
And
I did enjoy the science classes. I have to tell you, not organic chemistry, but the other ones, I did enjoy them. And I actually did really well in some of them. But my path forward was going to be pretty much blocked if I couldn't get through organic chemistry.
Is
So that's why. In some ways, that is why I'm an English professor, is because of organic chemistry.
is that why you went into sustainability studies?
Probably.
Yeah.
So what happened was I had gotten a master's degree in English, and I didn't know what I wanted to do after that. And so I wound up starting in a master's program in scientific and technical writing. And then I didn't really like that because I like ideas.
Yeah.
I like analyzing ideas and interpreting things. And I became a much better writer in that program, but it was a little too on the surface for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, well, you might say I got bored and I quit, but there was a professor at that university who was writing an environmental science textbook, and he needed someone to help him research and write the textbook. And that was just a job that paid money. So I took it, I got it, and I took it. And that was sort of my born again environmentalist experience because, helping him, learning about all the ways that humans impact the earth and for good and for ill, and that, all the ways that we depend on it. It kind of tapped into this underlying love of nature that I had always had through animals, but also just kind of running around in the woods and fields and creeks when I was a kid. And really, I think I got a lot of that from my dad. Um,
I want to ask if that's the reason you love Trudeau so much.
Thoreau?
Yeah, Trudeau.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There are many reasons, but sure. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it. Although I did not read Thoreau till I was really in my 30s. So, that I was yet to discover that. So I got very excited about it, but then I wanted to go on with school. So I worked for that professor for a year, Don Kaufman at Miami University. And then I went back to Ohio State where I had got my master's degree to do my PhD in English. And right at that time, there were a bunch of other English professor and graduate student types who were starting this field that we now know as eco-criticism. And so I kind of found out about them right at this time when I was trying to figure out a way to bring my love of literature and literary analysis together with my passion for the environment and sustainability. And so that's really been my professional community ever since I went back to graduate school. And that was in 1990, I think. And I was very fortunate to find a dissertation advisor when the time came who was interested in the same thing. He was not an expert in it. Nobody was at that time, but he was really willing to learn along with me, Louis Ullman, and he was a fantastic mentor and friend and is still a friend, which reminds me I haven't been in touch with him in a while.
Such is adult life, though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you can go away for, like, months on end and then come back after, like, a year and nothing matters. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Just pick up where you left off.
That's true. That is how it works.
Oh, for sure.
As long as they're still alive.
As long as they're still... That's true. That is true.
I mean,
I guess death is
the
the
older you
ultimate
get,
end.
The older you get, the more that is an issue.
It's fine. You just write letters to each other, and then your writing lasts forever. I mean...
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Your relationship will last forever on paper.
So when I came to Webster, I think they had an environmental science major that they had tried, and it hadn't worked out in the science program for various reasons. I can't quite remember. And I thought, well, maybe we should try a minor that's more multidisciplinary, that could kind of be something for all the Webster students. And that's how we started what is now the Sustainability Studies minor. It used to be called the Environmental Studies minor.
Yeah, I was really interested in that because you're teaching, what is it, ecofeminism?
Yes, I'm teaching a class called Ecofeminism and Environmental Justice. It is a literature-based class, but there's a lot of multidisciplinary information and texts and videos and things that kind of supplement the four main literary texts that we're looking at.
Yeah, I get so fascinated on how you can meld the creative writing and eco justice together, and
Mm-hmm.
I love that. So that's why I was like, I'm gonna bring that up. In your opinion, um, who is like the most impactful, like naturalist or like ecological thinker?
Well, impactful is one thing, right? And that's kind of hard to say, really. I mean, who has had the biggest impact on the world, the
Let's say for
country?
you.
For me,
Yeah. Mhm.
well, I think it kind of depends on when you're talking about. If I want to pick the writer who has been an influence on me for the longest and continues to be, I would have to pick Ursula Le Guin, who is a science fiction fantasy writer who died several years ago. But I was reading her books when I was a child. And, I wrote an article on one of her short stories, really almost a novella called Buffalo Gals Won't You Come Out Tonight, when I was in graduate school. And that was really one of my best received articles.
Why Buffalo Gals?
That's a great question. It's a song. There's a song, and
Oh,
and
okay.
that's a line from the song. The
I'm just not
song,
cultured enough for this.
yeah. Well, I think it's kind of an old like Western folk song kind of
Oh,
thing.
okay.
So, um, but the story doesn't actually use the song. But the main character of the story is a young girl who you might say undergoes a transformation into well, she herself doesn't undergo a transformation, but she kind of enters this realm where there's a lot of fluidity between humans and other animals. And so the idea of a buffalo gal, I think, kind of captures that sense of being non human and human at the same
I
time.
think that sounds really cool, but also kind of like a bad trip.
Yeah, I suppose, she really loves it. Let's put it that way. You'd have to read the story.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
definitely love to.
Yeah, she doesn't want to leave, but she has to. It's kind of the hero's journey, right? She's got to go back home.
I must force myself to become cultured, Carla. um,
You will be by the time the English department is finished with you. And of course, culture, what culture? Whose culture,
the
right?
English department's culture.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we'll take care of that.
Yay! I love being force fed culture. Like, it's gonna be great. So like, kind of to circle back, but why is it like so important that we not only read but write about our connections and experiences with the environment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I don't actually teach creative writing, but I do often give students in my classes, especially for final projects, a creative option. And I honestly think the best way to think about it comes from a colleague of mine, Sarah Jaquette Ray, who wrote a really great book that came out a few years ago called A Field Guide to Climate Anxiety: How to Keep Your Cool on a Warming Planet.
I went to her presentation.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for my
Yeah, we were
sustainabilities class.
really fortunate to have her speak over Zoom to a bunch of Webster students. She has a whole chapter in there about environmental fiction. I think it's about storytelling anyway. And one of the things she says somewhere in the book is because she's talking a lot about the things that shut people down from doing something about the state of the planet.
Yeah.
So burnout,
How to handle like climate anxiety.
and yeah, just the
Oh,
anxiety can be really paralyzing, right? The sense that I'm just one person, what can I do? And, like I said, if you do try to do too much, then you burn out. And so she's giving a lot of great advice based on extensive research into not just literature, but psychology, sociology, science. So it's a very multidisciplinary book. Sarah has a background in her PhD is in environmental studies, so it was interdisciplinary. And so one of the things she says is that to really work for a sustainable planet where humans and the rest of nature can all kind of go on together, we have to be able to imagine a future that we desire, right? You can't motivate yourself in the end out of fear, not long term. You have to be able to imagine something positive that you want. However, most people's imaginations are really limited by what they already know,
Mhm.
right? Either through their own lives or what they hear on social media or even what they're reading. So if you're reading a lot of kind of scary apocalyptic fiction, that might not help you imagine a future you can desire, right? It just makes you afraid of the future. So I think one challenge for creative writers is how to write about a future where things are profoundly changed because that's happening. Like we can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? Climate change is already happening. No, people don't talk about stopping it anymore.
For sure.
It's slowing it down, mitigating it, adapting to it, ideally in a way that, keeps everyone that we have now in terms of species and also in a just way. So that's a pretty tall order.
For sure. Especially when you throw politics into it. Oh, it's definitely going to get a mess.
Yeah. So, but I think stories are really powerful and they are a way that people use, whether they're conscious of it or not, to make sense of the world and think about the future. So I think that there is an opportunity for creative writers to make a really big difference.
Well, I definitely agree with that one. I would, at the moment, we're in U.S. literature going over Emerson and highly recommend it, especially if you're into, is it oh man, what is it?
Transcendentalism.
That's it. Thank you. I'm bad at big words, so thank you. Because it reminds me of romanticism.
It is a form of romanticism.
Yeah. It's just like highly focused on how they handle their relationship with the environment.
Yeah, although at least for Emerson, in the end, it's about those spiritual truths that you access through nature. I think for him, even though sometimes he wanted nature to be the main point, it wasn't. And that's where Thoreau was different. I think as his life went on, nature in some ways was enough. He didn't have to be looking through it for something more.
Yeah, I think that Thoreau actually did what Emerson was saying.
That is what that's how a lot of students see it. And I think there is some legitimacy to that view. I mean, Emerson also lived in the world and by his own principles, but Thoreau just took everything farther, right?
Yeah.
And he had a different life than Emerson did. He wasn't wealthy. He knew he was probably not going to live a long life pretty early on because he had tuberculosis. And he was a disappointment to Emerson in some ways. Emerson wanted him to be an intellectual and a scholar like he was. And when he gave his eulogy, he said, I can't remember what he put, but he basically said, instead of becoming an engineer for all America, and he meant, of course, intellectually and spiritually, he was the leader of a Huckleberry Party. And he did lead a lot of Huckleberry Parties, but of course, Emerson meant it metaphorically in the sense that, yeah, he was just going out and having a good time in the woods and bringing other people along, which I think is actually kind of important and not the way people think about Thoreau. And the rest of the eulogy is pretty complimentary. So maybe it's not fair to Emerson just to pull that part out. But
I think Thoreau was a activist because he not pay taxes because he didn't want that tax to go to some sort of war.
Yeah, it was the Mexican War, which arguably was a war over slavery, but it wasn't that he didn't want the money to go to the war. I mean, he didn't, but it was much more a symbolic withdrawal from the country. It's like basically saying, I'm not a member of this club anymore. I'm not paying my dues. That was important because of the impact it had on Martin Luther King and Gandhi, but the thing he did that was perhaps much more daring and activist was he helped one of John Brown's raiders who was escaping after the raid on Harper's Ferry get away to Canada. So most of those raiders were either killed on the spot or hung later. So that was very dangerous. He and his family hid enslaved people who were escaping. He was a very committed abolitionist. He kind of resented having to spend his time on it, right? He wished that the government would, be better so that they didn't condone enslaving people, but
Yeah.
his sisters, his mother, his aunts, they were all very, very intense abolitionists, and he was too. That's what their family did.
Yeah. So read cool stories like that, guys, because you too can be an activist through your writing. I think that was it. So it was nice sitting down with you, Karla. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk with me. I hope our listeners not only like get a sense of what the English department is, but also the amazing staff we have here and the passion that they have for like specific topics. Um, is there anything you would like to plug?
Yes. So, kind of on this environmental theme, I want to let everybody know that our writer for the David Clough Visiting Writers series this semester is fiction writer Allegra Hyde. She's going to be giving a reading that is open to everyone on Thursday, April 4th, 2024. Of course, 2024 at 1:30 in the Sun and Lounge. And according to Murray, who is arranging all of this, she is a writer who is at least compatible with ecofeminist concerns. The ecofeminism and environmental justice class is going to be attending, and she does address climate change in her fiction. So, if you are interested in those types of issues or just great writing, please come and join us.
And please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at English at Webster to keep up with everything that's going on in the English department. And don't forget the deadline for the Green Fuse is February 23rd. You can submit your work at thegreenfuse at webster.edu. All right. Thank you guys so much. Bye.